that Gene Hackman had a very strong jawline when I've seen him in other things. But in Hoosiers, I was thinking, well, maybe that jawline developed after the age of 55.
Meet Sara and Samantha.
Two cousins obsessed with exploring the vast pop culture landscape, one recommendation at a time.
In each episode, one clueless cousin shares real-time reactions as they navigate the twists and turns of a pop culture topic selected by the other.
From travel to movies,
Little Debbie's to trashy novels.
Get ready to eavesdrop on the candid reactions and dynamic conversations you can only have with family.
This is Foreign and Familiar.
Welcome to Foreign and Familiar. I am Samantha.
And I'm Sara.
Sara, light of my week. Wonderful. Always great to see your darling face.
Great to see you as well. And we get to spend like the whole morning together today, which was amazing.
Much so needed. Exciting. We're in season. We're either editing or recording or doing social media posts. So it's always great when we turn up and we're able to see each other a little bit more.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been talking about, Sara, is how over the couple seasons that we've had, this has morphed into some different iterations of maybe what we had originally thought. We tried some new topics. The first season was really kind of getting our audio set and figuring out if we want to talk about music or travel or pop culture, books. We've tried a little bit of everything. And I don't know that it's happened with intention, but this season is really mostly focused on movies, some television, but we've really kind of settled into a movie podcast, which I think is okay. I think it reserves the right for us to move across the board. And one of the things that I do want to say is we mentioned in an earlier episode, that we had Mission Impossible and that franchise earmarked for this podcast. And what I would like to say, Sara, to you, and quite frankly to our family listeners, over my dead body, will we do that for a future episode? And allow me to explain.
Please do.
I went with Eric and Thomas to go see the latest Mission Impossible. It was being billed as the final one. They got $400 million for this movie. And I gotta tell you, Sara, it was the worst movie I think I've ever seen. It was heavy-handed. The dialogue was unbelievable. I fell asleep twice in the theater, which I'm sure Tom Cruise would die if he knew that.
Right.
It was pretentious. It was bloated. It was a script written by AI. It was unrecognizable. It's like the end is so bad that it's not even worth. They try to shoehorn things in. Well, you didn't know it, but in the third movie, when you really did this one, this is what was setting up this. They were connected.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah.
This character is all of a sudden the long lost son of this character. There's this, that, and it just totally is just pretentious and overestimates its own impact on society.
Well, in contrast, and we won't linger here, I will just say that Friendship is totally worth the watch. The Tim Robinson, Paul Rudd movie that was released a few weeks ago. It is now available to stream. I highly recommend that you watch it. You know how much I love I Think You Should Leave and pretty much anything Tim Robinson does. And this movie was like an hour and a half of just him writing his thing, and it was wonderful.
Well, just like Friendship is sweeter with a snack, podcasting is always sweeter with a snack. And our snacking option of choice is always Little Debbie, whether we've been through the entire lineup or not. It is always our option of choice, but we still have a couple that we want to hit. So Sara, without further ado, what are we reviewing today?
So today we're talking about the gingerbread cookie, which is a soft-baked gingerbread cookie topped with white icing and festive sugar crystals. Now, it might seem weird that we're talking about the gingerbread cake in the middle of summer, fall, whatever season this ends up dropping in. But what I have noticed about the gingerbread cookies is that for the longest time, they were just part of the Christmas lineup. However, they've just kind of been rebranding them for all of the seasons. So in the fall, the gingerbread cookies come out, and on the box, it's just the cookies with a little scarf on them. In the spring, they had pastel colored crystal sprinkles on them. I don't know if they're part of the 4th of July lineup, but I would have
seen them in the 4th of July.
So it's probably just red and blue sprinkles. So an interesting choice to me that this is the cake that we're now rebranding for all of the different seasons. So, Sam, what's your take on the gingerbread?
So I would say it is a soft gingerbread cookie. I have really only ate it at the Christmas time. I would imagine it's the same, but just with different colors. As you mentioned, I think it's a passable Here's the thing. Gingerbread is never going to be my number one choice. I find it appropriate around the holidays. I like ginger snaps. Like, I like the cookies to be harder. So I think a soft gingerbread man cookie is probably never going to be what I select. However, I think it's a perfectly passable gingerbread. I think there's a lot of warm spices in it. It doesn't blow out your palate. I think in some of them we've talked about before, the snickerdoodle cream pie was more cinnamon than ginger and kind of snickerdoodle. So I don't get that on this one. I think sometimes Little Debbie struggles on the ginger flavor, but I think it's really nice. I would never pick them up on any box, probably ever. So, but I would imagine that the increased availability and the seasonality of them means that they're a pretty popular offering. How about you?
They not my first choice. I definitely agree with your sentiment. I love a good ginger snap in the winter. I much prefer like a harder cookie that I can dip in like tea. Or like a ginger molasses cookie combo would definitely be my preference. These are more sentimental for me. So my grandmother, for the longest time, these were her favorite Little Debbies. And so my uncle would always keep her stocked. And then when he passed away, that became my job to keep her stocked with the gingerbread Little Debbies. And so I remember shopping for them and feeling really excited about finding them, but it was never really because I was going to eat them. It was because, okay, I can do my job and keep her stocked with her favorite snack cakes. She passed away several years ago, so it's more of a nostalgic, I think of her whenever I'm eating them. I don't think I ever buy them just to buy them. If I know that you're coming for Cousin Con and I need to make sure I have a good selection of Little Debbies and I'll buy like the whole holiday lineup, I might throw the gingerbreads in there, but they're never my first choice. If I want something that's ginger, I'm going to go for a ginger snap or like a ginger molasses cookie.
Or ginger tea. I like ginger candy. I like the flavor.
Literally anything else.
Yeah. So I would say, I think that if you do like gingerbread cookies, if you do like the soft and you're okay with the soft texture, I think this would probably be a winner.
I think on the marketing front, I'm wondering if they found success with this because nobody else sells ginger flavored things during the rest of the year, if it's just very heavily marketed during the winter. But also I'm wondering why keep the shape, because they've changed the shape of the party cakes. You know, before we started filming, we were talking about the butterfly cakes, which are the exact same as the party cakes, the hexagonal party cakes. They're just a different shape. So it's interesting to me that they chose to keep the gingerbread man shape and not change it to like a flower for spring, or I don't know what they would do for the 4th of July.
They put a little top hat on him on the box for the 4th of July. It's
right.
I agree. It feels a little lazy, but and I don't know again who's eating a gingerbread man cookie in July, but there has to be a market for them. Little Debbie does their research.
Right.
So McKee Foods knows what's up.
They do. Who are we to question?
We would absolutely not want to be behaving like some small town Indiana community people that are questioning a new coach in town. But I digress.
That was an excellent tee up, Sam. Way to go.
I try. It's really subtle. It's really very subtle.
Well, with that, I think we should probably dive into our topic for today. And Sam teed it up perfectly. So today we are talking about the 1986 sports film Hoosiers, starring none other than Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, and Dennis Hopper.
Sara, why did you recommend Hoosiers, and or why did you think I would enjoy it?
So a couple of reasons. First of all, it felt very, very timely to talk about it now because Gene Hackman just passed away.
So sad.
It felt like a good time to talk about this movie that I think he's very well known for. Obviously, I love a good sports movie, so this is one that I have been a fan of for years. And my first introduction to it was when I was playing junior high volleyball. Our varsity team was on a track to make it to at least the regional, if not the state championships. And so there was one day during practice where we watched this movie as inspiration. And this was my first introduction to it. And I immediately became a fan. It entered my regular rotation and kind of just fell out of rotation. So I was excited to get back into it. This is inspired very loosely by the true story of Milan High School beating Muncie Central High School in the 1954 Indiana State Basketball Championship. Again, very loosely inspired by that. They took a lot of liberties with the film. At the box office, it grossed about $25.8 million.
1986 money is a bona fide box office hit.
Yes. So it's still very highly acclaimed. It's 92% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a film that's been preserved by the National Film Registry. Consistently ranks as one of the top sports movies in a variety of different lists. And we do have 2 Academy Award nominations, Dennis Hopper, who I'm sure we'll talk about more as Best Supporting Actor, and Jerry Goldsmith, who did the score for the movie, which we can definitely get into the score a little bit more. But I did read that he did something really interesting, and this was a movie that took place in the 1950s, filmed in the 1980s. So he did a combination of a traditional score, a little bit of synthetic, and he also used the sounds of basketballs as some percussion elements throughout the film. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that he did to create the score, and later went on to score the movie Rudy as well. So just an overall highly acclaimed sports movie that I thought we should probably check out.
Now, I had not watched Hoosiers. In some of my research, I actually read that it's still considered the best sports movie of all time. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually have not seen Rudy either, which stars your boy, Sean Astin. So that definitely, I'm sure, will be a future episode that we have going. I will say, going back to the Gene Hackman thing, that was so sad. And I know he's pretty critically acclaimed for this. I think that what's super interesting about this is he was 55 when this movie came out. So obviously 40 years later, he was 95. So he lived a very, very long life. And Dennis Hopper, I'm actually a huge fan of. Have you seen Speed?
I have, yes.
So he's the bad guy in Speed. He kind of had this energy that was really unpredictable. And I've never seen him in a role like this. So it was interesting to kind of see a softer side of him and see him pop up. I was very, very excited about that. The one thing I will say just off the jump of it, Sara, is that I'm just offended because this movie came out in 1986. That is my particular vintage. And it looked so old that I just felt personally attacked by the Hoosier cinematography.
It was filmed in 86, but it took place in the 1950s. So I'm sure that there were some elements that they used to make it look that way. So don't be too offended. I feel like it was a choice.
Listen, I will take that. I will receive that. I will internalize that and say it is a choice. So thank you, Sara, for being kind as always.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Anything else that our family listeners need to know before we jump in?
I think that pretty much covers our cultural notes. So I think we're ready to kind of dive into this movie and talk through some basketball. Sam, are you a basketball fan?
So many notes on this. So I would say that I am a college basketball fan. I went to Syracuse University, which has a storied, historied basketball program. And there was no basketball division in this lifetime like the Big East in the late 2000s. When I was up there at school, you had your perennial powerhouses, Syracuse, Georgetown, UConn. And I worked in Syracuse athletic communications and did communications for the men's basketball team. So I would say I know basketball within the context of Syracuse basketball. I will follow loosely with NBA. It's a different game. But one of the notes that I do have here is that it was nice because when they're talking about man-to-man or zone defense, I at least know what they're talking about from a basketball perspective. And just for family listeners, I have a car that I got at the end of last year, and I actually named him Carmelo, which is after Carmelo Anthony at Syracuse. So yes, I would say I was surprised that I was following through on the basketball so much, but yes, I follow. How about you?
I am not a basketball fan at all, which is kind of surprising that this is one of my favorite sports movies. I am more of a when I was a kid, I tried basketball one time. It was too much running for me. That's why I quit soccer. I did volleyball. I was in martial arts. That was more my speed. And as somebody who enjoys watching sports now, I enjoy watching football a lot. But I do have to say, I did get a little bit into the March Madness this year because some of my students were, they were kind of doing a bracket to make predictions amongst themselves. And so I did get a little bit invested in how the teams were doing and watched a little bit of basketball. But to your point, I think I understand enough of the terms to really follow what is going on in the movie. But it's a sport that every spring I think, man, I should get into this to kind of just talk with people about it. And I never do. So maybe this will be the year that it happens.
Yeah, I'll say this. I can't participate in March Madness because I'm so biased towards Syracuse. I always take them farther than they need to go. And it's just a waste of my time. I know I can't be objective. And when we get into the plot, I know enough of basketball to give some side eye to Coach's advice, but we will get into that after the break.
Sure. One final thing that I just thought, that's okay. One final thing before we cut to break that I just thought of, a cultural note on this movie. The gym that they used to film is kind of a little bit of a time capsule at this point. It's a rec center / museum that you can visit, and the gym is still decorated the way that it is in the movies, complete with the team picture from the movie hanging on the wall, complete with the signs that we'll see throughout the movies. So it is a little bit of a museum that you can go visit from this movie. So just one extra cultural note, but we're going to cut it to break. And when we come back, we will talk about the plot of Hoosiers. Break. We are ready to start talking about the 1986 sports movie Hoosiers. And Sam, I actually kind of want your opinion on this first part, because when I was watching the opening scene, it felt montagey, but I don't know that it was quite a montage. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I don't have a montage written down, but I do have what a long drive to start the movie. It seems like they put every single credit in the front credit, and it's just a car driving across Indiana and into downtown. I mean, there was a very, very long credit scene and wind up where nothing happened.
Yes, I agree with that. It's almost a full length, like 3.5 minute song of him. Gene Hackman, who is the main character, will say, driving through rural Indiana to the high school that he's going to be working at. And so with that, Gene Hackman plays our main character, Norman Dale. He is a former college basketball coach. He was in the military, and he is now moving to this very small town in Indiana to become the new high school basketball coach and a new, I think he's a history teacher or an economics teacher. something along those lines. That's kind of a very
right.
It's a very minor part of the plot that he is a teacher. But yes, so the story opens with him just driving to Hickory.
And he arrives to Hickory and he's looking for Principal Cletus, which all I could think about was, come on, Cletus, come on. From Nutty Professor. Come on, Cletus. Cletus, come on. Anyway, sorry.
No, I totally agree. So, yes, Cletus is the principal. They are old friends. They catch up very quickly, and we find out that this is kind of an agreement that they've come to, where they're helping each other out. Cletus is getting the basketball coach that he needs because their former basketball coach passed away. Norman is getting a job, which he was very much in need of. He is living on, I think, Cletus's farm as well. It's a mutual agreement between the two of them where they're both benefiting.
Absolutely. They seem to go back a long way. And Cletus, it's interesting because Gene Hackman, it seems like, just came from the military. So he said, I can't believe you were still in the military, but I'm glad you're here. So just a little bit of exposition, which they're going to get in to a little bit longer. On his way to the principal's office, he bumps into Miss Fleener.
Myra Fleener, played by Barbara Hershey. And I was kind of reading a very detailed description of the movie. I think it was more of kind of what the script would say. And her description was really interesting in that it focused on the fact that she was trying to be very, very blunt and very kind of cold to him, but she was like so beautiful that it wasn't working. And I think Barbara Hershey's a very attractive woman, but I don't know that her character strikes me as the so beautiful that it's taking away from her cold exterior type of character. So I just thought that was just one person's take, but I thought that was an interesting way to describe her.
Yeah, because I actually think that they make her quite frumpy looking to kind of make her from Indiana. So I would say that my initial, she goes in on him right away and starts asking him questions about seeing his teaching credentials and all of these things, and starts drawing boundaries with some of the students, which I know that we'll get into real quick. But my overarching note on her is Miss Fleener, more like Miss Raymer, because every time she's on screen, she's absolutely reaming someone out. Like, this movie is absolutely savage on so many levels. And what kept coming into my mind is every time she walked off screen was Ryan from season 8 of The Office, when Robert California's wife accidentally calls him Brian and they cut to his talking head and he goes, bitch.
Hey, well, it's really nice to meet you, Brian.
It's actually Ryan.
Oh, Ryan.
Bitch.
That's literally what I thought every time she was walking off screen. She's just unrelenting and very, very savage, very savage.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the overall tone of the town when Normandale is kind of first introduced, because not only does he get a very warm greeting from her, but then he is in the local barber shop, I think, basically getting interrogated in a circle by every male that plays a role in the town. So I think the sheriff is there, the principal's there again. We have all of these other people asking him questions. Where did you coach? What were you doing for the last few years? What's your record? Like, they are just really grilling him before they can kind of give him the approval of being the new high school coach.
Sara, you love a coach story that has to win over a booster club. I mean, this is Friday Night Lights, but in Indiana and a different sport.
It's Buddy Garrity all over again. I love it so much. Sam, you mentioned that Miss Fleener is kind of drawing these boundaries. And one of those boundaries is that we need to leave Jimmy alone. So Jimmy is this basketball prodigy. Like, he's the winning. if he's on the team, they're going to win. And he was really close with the former coach who passed away. And at this point, he and Miss Fleener have kind of decided he has a much better chance of getting an academic scholarship to get out of Hickory rather than playing basketball. And so she very much has said, stay away from Jimmy. He's not playing. He doesn't want that. Don't talk to him. So the lines have been drawn.
And flat out says, I don't want him to end up being 55 years old in Hickory like you. I have a question for you, Sara. As a teacher, what is your take on the approach and or standing that Miss Fleener has to tell the basketball coach to stay away from the basketball star?
Two thoughts. First of all, I think that especially the time that we live in now, kids have this dream of becoming professional athletes. And I think I try to be very honest with them that the chance of that happening is so small. I do think, yes, you have a much better chance of getting an academic scholarship than a sports scholarship, for sure. However, I also know that not every kid is wanting to focus on academics. Not every kid has a great home life. And so if basketball is that one thing where you feel like you are, where you feel like you belong, where you feel like people value you and you can contribute, then why in the world would you tell somebody not to do it?
I just think it's not her place even remotely at all. It is
Right.
the child's decision.
Yes, I think the better conversation would have been Jimmy's focusing on his grades. If his grades drop, we need to have a conversation about what that might look like. Because I'm sure the high school, well, maybe not because they're so small, but they probably have some sort of academic policy about you can only play if your grades are at a certain level. So Who knows?
I played softball, as we all know, and
Right.
we were not a great team, but I had to have a certain GPA in order to play. So yeah, it's none of her business.
Right.
Again, bitch.
Now we're starting to kind of meet the team, getting into some of the practices. And I think early on, Normandale is met with some challenges. First of all, that all these guys just want to come watch all of the practices. They just think that they can show up and watch practices, which he has to very quickly kind of shut down. Second of all, he has a team who is very small, so they only have a handful of players, but also dealing with some attitude issues. And so he ends up kicking 2 kids off of the team almost immediately because they are talking back to him, and has to kind of deal with rewriting like the routines and changing the norms. So there's a lot of, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it. And he'll counter with, well, we need to move as a unit. We need to operate as a team. We're going to do things that help us achieve that goal before we even worry about shooting any baskets. So just kind of reestablishing the way that the team is going to work.
It is basically just a small town where everybody thinks that they know what's best. All that they have going on is the basketball team. And I would say it's interesting that it's Hoosiers. You know, Indiana is known pretty well. There's Gonzaga in Indiana. There's Butler in Indiana. And those teams really always make it very far in the NCAA tournament. And then, of course, you have Indiana as the Big Ten. So I think selecting Indiana as the basketball town and like state where this is set in it probably makes sense. But yes, he's got to come in and do some unconventional military things. And I will say some of the back talk on some of these kids that you've mentioned were just wild. It was just insane. Sara, every time I'm watching people engage with the youth, I just have much more respect for you. That's all I can say.
Well, thank you. In our list of characters, our very small team, we have a couple of note. First of all, Whit is one of the boys who initially walks out of practice because he gets into an argument with the coach. He does end up coming back, and his dad kind of then becomes an ally of the coach when he realizes that he truly cares about the integrity of the team and the kids. We have Raid, who is a character who kind of works on learning his self-control. We have Everett, who will kind of come into play a little bit more. We have Ollie, who is the team manager who becomes more of a player. And Strap, who doesn't get a lot of screen time, but what I like about him is he is always praying before the games and oftentimes during the games. And so there's a point where the coach asks, like, how long is he going to be? And they say, like, until he's done. Like, he'll just come out when he's ready.
He's the original Tim Tebow. He's down on one knee, praying before everything. So yes, that is our ragtag group of 5 or 6.
Exactly. We are also introduced to Shooter, who is the father of Everett, and he is played by Dennis Hopper. He is the town drunk. He, I think, at one point may have had a successful high school career. He is the Buddy Garrity in a way. He is kind of living in those old glory days of when he played basketball, very knowledgeable about it, but just kind of not dealing with life very well right now.
It's very sad. I actually thought his character was very, very sad. And I think you understand maybe why he got the Academy Award nomination for it, because he clearly has an affliction, right? And I think the movie does a really good job. Gene Hackman is really there for him and lays down some rules and stuff. And I think that Dennis Hopper really wants to abide by those rules and really has a wealth of knowledge that can really benefit the team. But it's very clearly on display that, you know, it's an illness. It's an illness that he can't get under control.
As the practices continue, they're preparing for the first few games of the season. The townspeople keep expressing their distrust in the coach's crazy new ways of coaching and trying to get them to operate as a team. And so there's a lot of protest to the way things are happening. People continue trying to come into the practice to watch and kind of see what's going on for themselves. Whit's dad, Roland, this is where he finally kind of realizes what the coach is trying to do. And Whit has to apologize and ask to come back to practice. Norman then allows him to do so. And Roland is like, don't worry about these people. I'll get them to leave. I'll take care of it. And so he's finally kind of starting to win people over slowly. But one thing that's going to continue to kind of pose a problem, especially when he's trying to get these boys to operate in the way that he wants, is he does have a little bit of a temper.
Yeah, the military side comes out of him, and it's going to be his way or the highway. He's going to bench players, even if that means he's one player down on the team. And it's very much, it's what I say goes, and you can either be on my team or not be on my team.
That's the way things kind of go with the first couple of games, is that players are benched for not performing, for arguing. At one point, they end up playing with only 4 players on the team, I believe, or 4 players on the court. And so again, that kind of leads to this distrust that the town has overall with his coaching abilities.
Because they're going to win the right way or they're not going to win. And I think Raid is the example of this. So coach wants them to pass at least 4 times before they take a shot. This is the one that I was side-eyeing. 4 passes before a shot is a lot. I was waiting in the final game, or like as we're getting through here, and I just thought it was going to tee up to be a 4-pass score. And they kind of abandoned that plot point after, because then when I'm watching the game, I'm thinking they're not passing 4 times. But either way, he's gonna make sure that they win right.
Yeah, I took it more as like we have to start with the basics. And I think about like whenever I started playing volleyball, it was always pass, set, hit every single time. And in the reality of a game, it doesn't always work out that way. He wants them to get the basics of not one person is going to just shoot the whole time. We need to operate as a team. The kids are not happy with it. Raid gets pulled from the game because he's not playing the way that he's supposed to be playing. The townspeople are unhappy. For the first half of the movie for sure. It's just all of the townspeople being mad that Normandale is not coaching the way that they want him to coach, and they're not winning the games that they think they should be winning.
I will say one thing as they're showing and we're learning more about Hickory. Did you see the Flynn's sign in downtown Hickory?
I did, and I wrote that down for sure.
It was amazing and comforting, and I was like, Sara, yes, we're in Hickory. So, yes, but small town, he keeps having some run-ins with Miss Reamer, who never misses an opportunity. Tell him what a loser she thinks he is.
Right. And at some point, he just starts kind of giving it back, and he's like, well, you know, if you're so much better than me, why are you still here? And, you know, she goes through the thought, well, I went to college. I thought I could get away. I came back, blah, blah, blah. And
I had to take care of my parents. And
right.
I had to do all this because he does ask her point blank, why aren't you married? Or why have you never been married? And she says, it's none of your business. I get what they're doing. I didn't think that these two really had a ton of great chemistry, if I'm being honest.
At this point, Norman doesn't really have an assistant coach. Cletus, the principal, has kind of been filling that role off and on. At least one game, Norman got kicked out for arguing with the ref. And so this assistant coach role kind of becomes more and more important because obviously he's a little temperamental and he could get thrown out at any point. So there has to be somebody there to continue coaching as the game goes on.
Absolutely. And then also sometimes it's just hometown refs that don't want him there. But I would agree with you. He spent most of the movie walking off the court. Let's be real.
Right. Yeah, I probably undersold that a little bit. But eventually he kind of gives this proposal to Shooter, Dennis Hopper's character, that, hey, since you know your basketball so well, you can be my assistant coach. But in order for that to happen, you have to clean up. You cannot be drinking. You cannot show up to any of the games drunk. You have to be in a suit. You have to be like clean and ready to go. Initially, we don't think that he's going to really take up this offer, but he does show up a little late to one of the games, ready to be the assistant coach.
Yes, that's the essence of it, but he says it even more direct and harshly. He flat out says, you're an embarrassment to your son. You're a drunk. You need to pull yourself together. And I'm like, damn. And then Shooter's like, I think I want you to leave. Like, you're really being like, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But this is like really mean. And Gene Hackman's like, I don't care. I don't care. You're an embarrassment. You need to pull yourself together. I'm like, damn. Like, Hickory is...
It's a savage town.
Savage.
No wonder there are only 540 people who live there.
Maybe Miss Fleener's rubbing off on him. He's not wrong. He can't be drunk like that around the boys. And also you add in the fact that his son's on the team. And so you're putting this additional dynamic in on the team.
He's very savage with how he says it. But it apparently works because Shooter does show up to one of the games ready to be the assistant coach. And what I really liked about this dynamic as he's kind of stepping into that role is at one point Norman approaches the ref and he's like, hey, I need you to throw me out of the game, because he just kind of wants to see Shooter take over and take that coaching role and probably give him some confidence in himself too. Because he had made a comment to Norman, like, I'm here, I'm going to help, but you have to stay. Like, you can't leave me. And so he asks the ref to kick him out, which the ref does. Probably.
So he says, sure thing, Shooter, and then goes, hey, kick me out of the game.
A little abrupt in his introduction to coaching, but he does perfectly fine. He's able to get the boys through the rest of the game, has great ideas to kind of coach them through it.
And his son's like, Dad, yes, Dad, you know?
Yeah. He's able to woo his son, because we know that's the goal of every 80s sports movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the team is on its way. We have the coaching staff set, and this seems like a great time to take a break as we head into the back half.
We are talking about Hoosiers. It's been a little bit of a rocky season for Normandale and the rest of the boys basketball team. We are progressing through the season. However, even though the boys are performing, they're starting to win some games. the townspeople are just not happy with Normandale. And so they have basically a town meeting where everybody talks about why they dislike him, and they ultimately have a vote on whether he'll stay on as coach or not.
Again, we should call Hickory the world's most unfriendliest town. If you were looking for a shred of kindness in Hickory, Indiana, keep driving. So Gene Hackman's character brings a little bit of that kindness. It is wrapped up in a little, let's call it an insult Oreo, it's a little slap, a little bit of cream in the center, little slap on the end. But yeah, winning games doesn't matter. None of it matters. They just don't like him. And as they're preparing for this vote, Miss Flaner, man, that witch flies back in on her broomstick and drops this big revelation, because she's got all the time in the world to go to the library and look at the microfilm, which, Sara, I feel like let's start a petition to get back the microfilm in libraries. I'm obsessed with this. Whenever it pops up in a movie, I think, God, I wish we still lived in this time.
Miss Fleener finds out why Normandale is no longer a college basketball coach, and it was because he struck one of his players when he was mad at them and was fired, and I think banned from coaching college ball ever again.
Yeah, he just hauls off and punches his player right there. So you can say, and I don't think he looks an appropriate amount of ashamed at that. I think he is kind of like, thanks for getting in my business, Barbara Fleet Hershey.
Right.
And here's what I will say about Gene Hackman's portrayal in this. I do think he's in military and they try to play him off, but he does have this really kind of, I don't want to say kind way about him, but different way about him that actually is somewhat a little bit inspirational. I have notes peppered throughout here that say he just does not have the chin to pull off the military veteran role that he is playing. I don't know. I think I have said this before about strong jawlines or things like that. I always thought that Gene Hackman had a very strong jawline when I've seen him in other things. But in Hoosiers, I was thinking, well, maybe that jawline developed after the age of 55. Or maybe, I doubt Gene Hackman got a chin implant. But that's neither here nor there. It's just hard to hear that he's punching this kid where it's you don't even have a chin. I don't even know what to tell you. You're a military man.
Right. So Sam's not buying the backstory in Hoosiers.
I just, give me a guy with a chin and I believe it.
Miss Fleener does have this information about why he was fired, and this is her opportunity to share it. And I think this is where things kind of start to turn, and maybe where they're trying to develop that romance, in that she chooses not to share it and really chooses just kind of not to say anything much at all. Just says, we need to give him a chance.
She's acting as principal, so she does this whole riot act when she confronts him, and basically is people deserve the right to know. Everybody's not going to drive 4 towns over to read the microfilm. This is totally in your control, in your hands. So yeah, she decides not to, but it really does not make a huge impact on the vote.
No, so they do vote him out. However, at the last minute, Jimmy comes in, and it's just such a cheesy line, and I love it. I reckon it's time I start playing ball again.
I don't know if it'll make any change, but I figure it's time for me to start playing ball.
The whole town is there, and they all start cheering. They're so relieved their star ball player is back.
I play, Coach stays. He goes, I go.
But he says he's not going to play unless Coach stays. And Sara, I actually am curious if I missed something in this, because I don't know if it's because the coach was not approaching him. I don't know what it was, but it seemed like, I don't know if Jimmy was just watching the team or hearing the rumblings or seeing how they were all coming together. But that requirement didn't feel very earned to me. And it also just might be that I missed it, though.
He does talk to Jimmy a couple of times, And those interactions are basically like, look, if you don't want to play ball, I don't think that you should play ball, and nobody should try to make you. It needs to be your decision. And I think he probably appreciated that there was somebody who was like, listen, I recognize your talent, but like, you got to do you, bro. And I also
he flat out says, I don't care if you play or not. Yeah.
Right. He's like truly not interested. And also, I do think that he sees what is happening with the team. And it's kind of hard to say because when the movies, it's not like Normandale is coming into a team that doesn't exist. He's coming into an established team who just needs some work to get back.
Coach. Yeah.
Yeah, they just need a new coach. And so it's almost like they set it up like Jimmy was watching him take this group and turn them into a team, when I don't think that that's quite the story that they were telling, but I think that's what they were going for with the whole I'll only play if he stays thing.
And I think that they said that the previous year they were 19-10. So yeah, so they were kind of a semi-decent team before.
Right.
So the town folk decide, oh, can we vote again? So obviously it then goes into that Normandale can keep his job and they can continue the season. All of a sudden, Miss Fleener and him are smooching a little bit.
They sure are. So I think at this point we do get some true 80s montages of all of the different games that they are playing throughout the season.
It's an 80s montage, brighter than the sun, training together till the work is done.
Kind of intermixed with Shooter falling back into his drunk habits. Yeah.
So embarrassing. He shows up in the middle of the game drunk, and yeah, it was sad.
Right. He is eventually put into a rehab. They find him unconscious at one point. So obviously he needs more help than just Normandale making him the assistant coach and dunking him in water.
Shaming him into sobriety and forcing him to coach after he's told, don't leave me.
Right. That didn't work. Mm-hmm. Let's try rehab.
The rehab is just like a normal hospital in the 50s, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. They finally make it to the state finals. Shock and awe. We had no idea they were going to make it here.
I've read this is the greatest sports movie of all time. Here's what I will concede. It is the whitest sports movie of all time. Okay. In the run up here, Ollie, the little equipment manager, is winning games by doing granny shots in between his legs, which Sara, as a regulation stickler, I have to tell you, I do not think that that is appropriate on how you can shoot a foul shot. When we get into the championship game, a barbershop quartet is who opens up the state regional finals. I just noticed it was moving forward, but missing a few things, I think.
Sure, that's totally fair. Cousin Husband actually made the exact same comment. He came in during the state championship game and was like, did they just decide to make it diverse in the last 5 minutes of the game?
Well, my note on this is it felt racially coded to me at the end, because they're saying these guys are so much bigger and they got so much more. And then it was now a team that included one or two Black players. And it just, it's a movie of the times. It's a movie of the times, I think, a little bit. Yeah.
Right. I totally agree. I would say what they were probably going for is the fact that this was a city school versus their rural Indiana school. But I totally agree.
And that's like racially.
Yes, racially coded. It is very whitewashed.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. They get to the state championship. They walk into this gym and it is massive. It's the biggest gym that they've ever seen. They get out a tape measure and they start measuring the distance. They measure the height of the hoop. They measure from the foul line, and they realize that yes, the actual facility is so much bigger, but the court is the exact same size that they've always played on. It's supposed to help them not feel as intimidated as they initially are.
And they work to just get comfortable. And so it's an interesting dichotomy and contrast, because one of the games at the beginning of the season is in an even more rural school than they are. And so they call it the cage because it's very tiny. The crowd is basically on the court. So it's interesting to watch them get acclimated and play in a variety of different environments.
Wrapping things up, it is a close game. Toward the end, Norman tells the team, use Jimmy as a decoy. Merle's going to take the final shot. And it's very obvious that Merle doesn't feel comfortable. He doesn't feel confident that he can make that shot and win the game for them. There is a little bit of a moment where they're all kind of looking around and Jimmy says, I'll make the shot. Don't worry, coach.
Well, he just says, I'll make it.
I'll make it.
Jimmy's a man of few words. But he gets
and when I was looking at most of this, Sara, which was so funny, I was looking up the GIFs. That seems to be the most popular GIF from Hoosiers is I'll make it.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to start using that in our text conversations for sure.
Yeah. But I appreciate the confidence. Like, good, Jimmy. Like, you go.
Yeah. I mean, that's what he's known for. So obviously they make it. They win the game. They are the Indiana State champions. We kind of alluded to this earlier, Sam, that early on in the movie, there's a big focus on passing before you shoot. And it does seem at this juncture that is just kind of gone. And they're back to that initial, like, we just take the shots when they're available mentality. Anything else that you wanted to kind of share on that front before we wrap things up here?
No, I just noticed, and I think I spoiled a little bit earlier, but I thought that this was setting up for a pass, shoot. That feels like a little bit of an untidy plot point, because he really takes a stand earlier in the movie to say, I would rather play with 4 players than play with 5 and having Raid in there if he's not going to pass 4 times. And I guess it's like, if he's not going to listen to me, but it was, he wasn't listening on the passing. So I thought it was set for a certain formula. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Actually, on a rewatch, I was surprised. I had forgotten that Jimmy took that final shot, because I thought the same thing too. I think it would be really telling if Jimmy was a key player, but obviously the team was able to function without him. And so I do think it would have been much better if they had done some passing with him as the decoy and Merle made that final shot, or really it could have been anybody who made that final shot, really. The only thing that I can think of that they were maybe they were trying to establish that there was more of a trusting relationship on both parts. And so it wasn't so much just the not listening and the back talk, but more of he was willing to listen to the players and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but you've had some good insights on both sides of it this whole episode. But yeah, that he maybe allows that it doesn't have to be his way or the highway.
Yeah, I don't know. So regardless, Jimmy makes the shot, they win, and that wraps up Hoosiers.
After that, they fast forward to generations of the future, and the team photo is on the gym wall and the camera goes up, and it's a very, very traditional sports movie ending, I would say.
Right. Yeah,
these
absolutely.
kids live in on infamy,
The only thing it was missing, because it wasn't based on a true story, it was just inspired by true events. We didn't get that cut to black text that says, the Indiana or the Hoosiers went on to win, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that was missing from the end of the movie. Let's close it out. So Sam, after experiencing what is called one of the best sports movies of all time, do you think that you would watch this again? Is this entering your rotation at all?
So I've heard about Hoosiers my entire life. I have never seen it. And so I was excited to see it. I think that Hoosiers is a movie of the time. Maybe it set up the blueprint that a lot of sports movies follow. My notes here just say men with a shrugging emoji. I haven't seen Rudy. I'm sure that's something that we'll see. I think that I have seen a lot better sports movies. I think I've seen more emotional moments in sports movies. So I would say that this one did not exactly hit for me. And I just think that sometimes things happen in the cultural moment, right? So it has to be that generations of people connected with this, obviously, when it was open, and there's the emotionalness of it. And maybe it is kind of like these guys are very stilted in how they communicate, and some of the, there are heavy themes that are presented, but there's not a lot of necessarily diving in or character development. And maybe that's just a sign of the times of like how men communicate. Do you know what I mean? Like, or we're communicating at that time, and there's a lot of unspokenness there. I think I'm good on it, but I also think I know better than to say to people, I don't even get what the big deal with Hoosiers is outside of this podcast and this conversation, because I do think it's beloved. I think Dennis Hopper's great. I love Gene Hackman. I just don't know if 40 years later I connect to it.
Sure.
How about you? How often do you watch this? I know it seems like it's you watched it in high school and everything, but how often do you watch it now?
Not as often. I think we've talked about this before. I am very like seasonal with how I kind of organize things that are on my watch list, etc. And I know basketball isn't a fall sport, but this is very much like a fall movie for me that I might use to break up the Halloween rotations. And I think part of that is because that's when I was introduced to it. It's it's very like fall atmospheric. Like there's a lot of early morning foggy farm shots, which is kind of very similar to the area that I grew up in. So it's very nostalgic for me. It's also something that I remember watching with my family, and it's one of those movies that like we can still talk about. So I don't know that this is going to make it back into my I watch it every year rotation, but I am glad that I had an opportunity to rewatch it, and I will definitely do so. And maybe like 2 or 3 years, I'll hit it up again and see if I still enjoy it.
I'm also glad I watched it because I think regardless of anything, this movie has been synonymous with Gene Hackman. I think Gene Hackman has set a standard for coaching or coaches, so I am glad that I got to see it, and I'm glad that you recommended it. It was worth checking out.
And I feel too that I feel like the majority of sports movies are all football related. I know that there are a handful of basketball, hockey, other sports, but I do feel like it's nice to have a highly acclaimed one that's not necessarily football. So I do enjoy mixing that up a little bit. So continuing with our wrap up questions, let's compare this to a Little Debbie. Sam, which one would you pick?
I compared this to the pecan spin wheel.
Okay.
Because it looks like it's going to be good, but it just eats a little dry. And on top of that, like, it's just missing something. It's missing an icing. It's missing something like that. But I also picked it because I think we talked a little bit earlier this season. A pecan spin wheel is a treat of the times. It's kind of a retro vibe and retro feel. I think we said, it would be great. Those are probably staples at women's church breakfasts in rural towns. Yep. And I'm sure Hoosiers is on the TV for the men while the women are doing that, right? So yeah. I think that the pecan spin wheel, like, again, looking at a moment in time when this came out in 1986, and obviously it's emulating the 1950s. So again, we were talking about the 30-year retro trend. So that was probably right in the center of the zeitgeist because the 50s were coming back in. So I get it. And I get why the pecan spin wheel would be the treat of the times. But that's what I have compared this one to. How about you?
So I, oddly enough, have the gingerbread for this one. I think that there's a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in both of them for me. But I also think it's something that I enjoy, but it's now one of those things where every once in a while I'm like, let me just take a bite and see if I still enjoy this. It's something that I revisit more out of the emotions associated with it than actually knowing whether I enjoy it. And I mean, I really enjoyed this rewatch, but I can definitely acknowledge more, like we talked about, the flaws with this movie than I did when I used to watch it regularly as a young teen.
I think with Gene Hackman's passing, it's re-put this movie back into the zeitgeist. And that, again, I don't try to read too much before we watch these movies, but you're seeing headlines around when Gene Hackman passed that are like, Hoosiers is revisiting the best sports movie of all time. And I think some of its reputation lets it down a little bit. I think if it was just a heartfelt sports movie that if you haven't seen it, you have to see it. Like, I feel that way about Remember the Titans. That's one of my favorite sports movies. And that's one that I watched from beginning to end when I was a child over and over and over again.
Right.
But I would never say Remember the Titans is the best sports movie of all time. What I would tell people is if you haven't seen Remember the Titans, like, stop what you're doing and go run and do it and let me know when you watch it. And I think I'd probably be on someone to watch it. But the think pieces, it just kind of feels like I'm correlating this to the manosphere that we're seeing right now. And like the think pieces about this movie. And then what I saw, it just didn't align. Goodness knows I'm certainly one, as Cousin Husband always points out, to hype things up. So I just may be a victim of my own self here. I may have just been Samantha. It is life-changing, and there is a headline that corresponds with that, and that's all I'm going to say.
It is interesting because, as we talked about, this is inspired by true events. And from what I've read, the high school that it's based off of went into the state championship with a winning record and as the predicted champion of that competition. So it's so interesting that the writers were like, let's take this school that had a winning record, a winning history, and were predicted to win, and let's make them a small town with a losing team who's not supposed to. Like, it's just really interesting because I feel like you could just say, hey, what if we write a movie about a small town, not say, let's base it off of this real event, except let's change every single detail about it. So it does have a little bit of an interesting origin.
I think this movie, as we're kind of talking around, plays to a specific set. And I think that's fine. I am glad I watched it. I wasn't mad at it at all. I just, like I said, was maybe expecting a little bit more gravitas, but what? Who cares? That is it for Hoosiers. I don't even want to say if you have different thoughts on this movie to let us know. But I think we gotta do that. You can find us on Instagram at FauxFamPod and on Gmail at foreignfamiliarpod@gmail.com.
See ya in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks for eavesdropping on us.
If you can't get enough of the Cousin Chronicles, head over to Instagram and follow @FauxFamPod for more in-depth info and behind-the-scenes details.
Or email us at foreignfamiliarpod@gmail.com.
Foreign and Familiar is a Flynn & Flynn production.
The theme is Colorful by Allerlie von Nicolai.